Power Athlete Nation.
Yes, you rang.
What's happening?
What is happening?
A podcast?
I think so. This is another episode of...
The premier podcast in strength and...
You tell me.
Condition.
Ing.
We got three.
We got him. Ladies and gentlemen, that's right. It is a crew episode. And we are here with our colleague, PT extraordinaire, Block 1 coach, Matt Zanis? Zenius. Have we been, you know what? Is it Zanis?
Well, he's the star of Turkish Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
So
Matt
Turkish
Zanis.
Star Wars.
Yes.
have you ever Google Turkish Star Wars and look
Training
for it?
I've
on
not
YouTube?
heard of that, but I need to look that up now.
At least once a week back in the day, we used to watch it for inspiration when programming and also getting ready to do our own training.
Mostly the training montage. Now, the whole movie, I have to admit, guys, I have not actually seen.
I don't think anybody's seen it.
Good, fair enough. But yeah, it's Bollywood's take on Star Wars in the 70s, and has one of the most epic training montages in cinema history.
Are you saying my hair fits the culture?
Possibly.
Maybe.
Possibly.
Maybe a little bit. Hey, it's better than being correlated to the Princess Bride movie when I had my facial hair.
Oh.
You know,
As you wish.
that was a dark time.
Yeah, the RUSs, rats of unusual size.
The so Tex, do we have a voicemail, or is this a topical topic?
This is a call to action, a CTA.
And that voice of an angel is Mr. Tax McQuilkin.
Yeah, well, this past week in the NFL, there was this alarming number of ACL tears, high ankle sprains, Achilles tears, and issues. Rich Incognito, he suffered he suffered an Achilles issue.
A lot of bananas.
He didn't rupture it, but he's still at it. And we just had to tap in Matt Zanis, who wrote a blog for us.
When Richie hurt himself, when they cracked, actually gravy came out. So he broke his wishbone.
Hey-oh.
Yeah. I saw some pictures of Richie, not looking slim.
Well, he's paid a lot of money to look that way, John.
It's bad. I mean, he hasn't been in shape since he was 12.
Well, a number of premier athletes went down, including Saquon Barkley, who was so much fun to watch. Christian McCaffery, he's the one with the high ankle sprain. And
they just paid him a ton of money.
Yeah, well, a lot of these guys got paid a ton of money.
You think there's a correlation between the money getting paid and the injuries?
I don't know, but I'm sure that some nerd out there can figure that out. But Broncos wide receiver went down. Seahawks linebacker, both with ACL tears. So this is week 2.
And also Nick Busu.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then the premier, he got paid, or his brother just got paid from San Diego. But needless to say, why week
I like them way better than the Watt brothers. I mean, the Busu brothers are way better than the Watt brothers. If I was going to take a brothers against brothers, I would take the Busu brothers.
Is that what
over
this podcast is about?
Well, I mean.
Okay, well, show me the Bosa's brothers TV show.
Well, they actually have real first names, not just acronyms.
Well, that sounds ridiculous.
TJ and JJ?
Yeah.
Yes.
What are their...
They're into that whole brevity thing, you know?
All right. And then they also have a fullback brother.
Stan. Like, this is TJ and JJ and Stan.
Laser, taser, blazer.
His
ZJ?
name is DJ.
Is his name DJ?
Derek. Yeah. Derek John Watt. DJ.
ZJ. If you got to ask, big man, you can't afford it.
All right. Well, as much as John loves to talk about J.J. Watt and bring him into the picture,
Facts.
I feel big question, Matt. Why week 2? They went full speed. Week 1.
I feel like we're on a repeater again, though, Tex. We talked about J.J. Watt last time, and it's another foot problem.
I feel like we're doing a repeater again.
It is a repeater.
Feels a little bit like a repeater again.
That'll happen. Hey, but
that will happen.
J.J. Watt is injury-free. If once he makes it through all 16 games this season, we'll have a J.J. Watt podcast. I'll do what I can to get him on. But in the meantime, let's talk about why week 2. Why not week 1? Is it lack of preseason? What's going on? What are your feels, Matt?
It's tempting to try and correlate something like a lack of preseason to what's going on with the injuries right now. But at the end of the day, it's probably more so related to just randomness of playing football. Now, if we start to see these rash of injuries continue on into weeks 3, 4, 5, and so on, I think there'd probably a little bit more to talk about. But at the end of the day, like, lack of preparation is, I think these guys are preparing for a while, right? But there is one common denominator that we're kind of seeing in relation to all these injuries, because the majority of them are lower body, right? So we got high ankle sprains, ACLs, or Achilles tendons, hamstrings, groins, and that one connection point is the foot and the ankle. It's the only point of connection with the ground. So I think it has a lot to do with what's going on down there, our lack of awareness around the foot, and then also how these cleats and these athletic shoes are impacting what's going on up the rest of the kinetic chain.
How many are non-contact? All of them? All that you mentioned?
No. There was an interesting mix. One of the thoughts I had when I was trying to, not prepare for this, but understand why this might happen, it could be changes in surfaces. So we used to see a higher spike in injuries when, let's say we practiced on all grass and we had to go play on turf. We had a higher rate of injuries. So if we were playing a turf game that Sunday, we practiced on the turf. If we were playing grass, we played grass regardless of the weather, just because we wanted people to be used to that turf, surface. So on grass, you slide a little bit more, whereas on the turf, you tend to catch. And so we had to, work out your shoes, what shoes you're going to wear, what does their turf look like? And that was actually a real science in this piece. So I'm wondering if maybe guys had been pretty consistent through the offseason training on grass, and then all of a sudden they get into a little bit different of an environment, maybe the shoes they catch. Or my contention is football is best played at I know this sounds kind of crazy, at an 80%. So when you go through a training camp and you bang and you hit a lot, you're at this something like 80%, and everybody's at this 80%, and it looks pretty good, and people can play. All of a sudden, when you're too fresh or guys aren't banged up and they're playing at 100%, and the guys are so big and dynamic, that's when you see people's fucking bodies just explode. And all the time, if a guy missed a whole bunch of time coming back from an injury and he'd come out there, we'd be like, dude, it's too fresh. You better slow it down. You're going to get hurt. You got to wear it down. So there was kind of this 80% and kind of ratcheted up a little, but when guys were too fresh and they went too hard, sometimes injuries happened. So maybe these guys were too recovered going into the season and then not having enough of a preseason or really a tough enough training camp that we're just seeing these guys too big, too strong, just having some major injuries.
Right. I think you bring up two really good points there. One being the environment, right? So the environment, not only that they're playing on, but then also what's going on inside the shoes as well, because a lot of these guys are getting ankle tape jobs, and I'm a recovering ankle taper as well. So we know how much bullshit that is, taping up the ankle to try and prevent these ankle sprains and everything. But you're 100% right. With those cleats and gripping and contacting the turf, there's a lot more grip occurring there. So all the forces are essentially going into the shoe, and the foot's not really attenuating anything. It can't transmit anything effectively up the rest of the chain. And that's what a lot of the tape jobs are doing. They're making things too restrictive. The shoes are too restrictive on the foot and not allowing the 33 joints in the foot to essentially do their job and attenuate the forces, and then transmit that appropriately through the spiraling pathway up into the knee and up into the hip to allow those the mechanical nature of the dynamic stabilizers, meaning the muscles and everything, to do their job appropriately, instead of putting it into stresses into areas like the ACL or into the tendons of the hamstring where they can't really hold those forces all too well.
On a note as well, I heard through NFL Network, the Meadowlands, so the Giant Stadium, how terrible the turf is from the players' perspective. Even the 49ers, who went out and almost wanted to forfeit or not play in the game because they didn't like the turf. And then we saw 10 of their starters go down at a 22, and then Barkley. So this was the Saquon Barkley game. It was Giants 49ers, and we see these giant. Can any intervention be done with the turf field? Is it just beyond player or coach's control?
Well, so I got a scar on my knee that I look at almost every single day that reminds me of what it's like to play on terrible turf. I mean, I ruptured my patellar tendon in the Philadelphia Eagles Veterans Stadium, which was like painted concrete. It was like, you guys have played miniature golf?
Yeah.
Imagine playing football on a miniature golf, like that level of stuff. I mean, it was awful. And actually, my foot got caught in a seam. My foot got stuck, and then when I got hit, I got loaded, and that was when my knee ruptured. So, I mean, dude, for years, I mean, for 10 years, I probably still had scars on my legs and on my elbows and stuff from like skidding on that turf. And it was like painted concrete. So I watched a dude get tackled from behind, kind of a horse collar, before it was illegal. And he blew both ACLs on one play. So, I mean, like the turf was, I mean, we used to call it the turf monster. And there was a lot of funny jokes that weren't really funny about it. But the Meadowlands, so I think what happens is with these older stadiums, they don't have the drainage or they don't have like the system in place. So what they do is when they build these new stadiums, they like, I don't know if you guys watched the construction of the Raiders. So they had a whole YouTube thing on like how they constructed it, how they built it, like the walls and like this pretty amazing like feat of engineering. But they put a ton of time and money and effort and thought into creating an excellent surface for these guys to play on. And, you know, there's a slight little bit of bounce in it. I mean, there's like, you know, like the grass height, they can adjust. I mean, there's all this amazing stuff. And I think the problem is you have a place like the Meadowlands, which is what, built 30, 40, 50 years ago?
No, this is the new one.
Oh, this is the brand new one?
Yeah. And to put it, I can look up the year, but I know that
it's just
Peyton,
been within, is it
the
been
Super
within the
Bowl
last,
that Peyton won.
So it's been within the last 10 years.
Yeah. Maybe that was 16.
Okay. So it was within the last 10 years. I just don't know if maybe they're keeping up with it, and who knows? You know, maybe the New York Giants want the turf to be shitty. Who knows? Yeah.
Is that even really a controllable, modifiable factor, right?
Yeah.
Like
I mean, if things are uneven, like that was an interesting thing too. Like sometimes there'd be bumps or like, you know, like normally like grass fields kind of taper down this way, you know, because they want them to crown in the middle and then they flow this way. Not all the turf fields were kind of like that. So I don't know. I mean, maybe just different service, or maybe the guy just wears the wrong shoes, or maybe it's just an injury waiting to happen. You know, so much force in the hamstring and not enough, you know, flexibility in the foot.
2010.
I mean,
yeah, so it's been 10 years. I mean, think about just the advances. I mean, think about where we were within cell phones 10 years ago. I mean, you tell me that the turf hasn't improved. All the players now are all wearing sensors, and all of their gear has different sensors. So the pads, the helmets, everything. So that not only can they can track the guy. So they have like something like 700 cameras, and I'm making up that number, but some astronomical amount of cameras with sensors and everything. So they can track every single movement and actually create 3D models. So have you seen now when the announcers go to like a play and they can show that kind of 360 deal? The way that works is from sensors and all these different cameras to create this almost virtual reality deal. So I'm pretty interested.
I was going to say that at the end of the day, though, now like the injury rates are still increasing every single year, right? So we're really no better despite all these advancements. And I'm going to use the word technology for the advancements into shoe design. I mean, I think they've done a great job at, you know, exponentially improving the performance of the athletes. But the one thing that they're not really doing is decreasing these risks of lower body injuries. Like we're still seeing it across the board, either staying level or climbing every year.
And I got some quick stats to back that up. And we're looking at, I'll just give the last 5 years. 2015, we had 49 ACL tears, 26 of which occurred in the preseason. So just over 50%. Then 48, 16, 51, 17, 53, 18.
What did it look like in 8 and 9? Does it show 2008 and 2009?
No, up to 10 here, but roughly 50+% occur in the preseason. So those first 4 weeks.
But that's when the CBA changed. And you remember they actually took padded practices out. So now a team, I think, only gets maybe a handful of padded practices the whole season. Before it wasn't limited. So after 2010, after the current CBA, and I remember when that happened, they saw that there would be a spike in lower body injuries.
And then is this, again, just question if they delineate what between contact and non-contact?
This current graph, no. This,
and
what
then
I'm
Zanis,
looking up is just preseason.
The injury rate data that you're looking at, does it take into account contact versus non-contact or upper,
they do.
lower?
They stratified into lower and upper body, and then also into contact versus non-contact. And what was really interesting, John, you brought up the CBA. The first 2 years after the CBA, we actually saw a dip in injuries. So they actually went down a tiny bit, but then started to spike again afterwards, which is, it's an interesting data point because it's like I can't really explain a lot of it right now.
Is there any analysis on age of the player. Like, is it a young player, new player? Like, I think that there's so many interesting different ways to slice this data to determine a true trend of injury rate and potentially identify a cause. If it is like, these kids are coming in with mandatory ankle tape through high school now, and they haven't and then you just see this thing compound over time where, did you have to get your ankles taped in college, Sean?
Uh-huh. Yeah, we had, this is crazy, but we didn't have to tape our ankles in high school. But in college, we had to tape our ankles.
Okay.
And as offensive linemen, we had to wear knee braces, which were like, reminded me of like, when Forrest Gump's a little kid.
Oh, yeah.
That was what our knee braces. They were these massive Don Joy custom fit ACL braces. And the crazy part is we had dudes still blow ACLs wearing them. And we're like, but I thought these, and then it's like, it's bullshit.
So back then, were you were you like, sweet, these braces are going to protect me? Or did you know back then, like when you got fitted and warm, or you just like, well, that's what the coach wants, I'm doing it?
No, I felt like, I felt way less athletic. And it took me like a long time to actually learn to play with like that restriction on. And I think that's an interesting piece, because I'm like, why would you want to reduce somebody's athleticism and their ability to move through space under the idea that you're going to protect them from something that might potentially happen?
Buy down risk, I guess.
And that's what they're doing. And what's crazy is I still tore my ACL wearing the brace. And then at that point when I came back, I wore the brace my junior year. And then I didn't wear the brace my senior year, and they got mad. And I was like, you can fucking dawn patrol me till I die, which was their punishment, where if like you got a penalty or you didn't tape your ankle or whatever, they would give you a dawn patrol. You had to wake up at like 5 and run stairs. I'm like, I'll do them every day. And then what I did is I stole a set of old knee braces and just taped a hinge on the side of my leg. And I was like, I'm wearing knee braces. You're not wearing the approved knee braces.
I like it.
Yeah, well, like it's like I don't understand the idea of like restricting a joint or restricting an individual that's healthy out of fear that something might happen when it reduces the mobility and creates a bigger problem. Like locking the ankles in position. I'm like, how does this work? I mean, I'd get my ankles taped like 3 hours ahead of time, and I would squirt water in them so they loosened up. And I'm like, how is this fucking helping anybody?
So Zanis, on the ankle tape job, right? So the foot has these magical nerves and tissues and everything that you and Dr. Emily Splitchell were talking about. So when you tape and you put like a heel lock in and you restrict ankle movement, like what percentage is there? A percentage of dysfunction you're applying? Does that make sense? Like what are you immobilizing? What are the potential issues? And then are there even any benefits to do like a cost benefit analysis?
There was no, I wouldn't use the term percentages for this, Luke. Like the whole reason why we would tape an ankle is because we assigned a label as a position of the foot being good or bad, right? But there is no good or bad. And what they were doing was saying that supination or having more of an arch in the foot was a good position versus pronation being a bad position. But we know now that they couldn't have been they're so far off the mark with it all. Like we need both. You need to be able to pronate and supinate. So essentially what happened is you lock the foot into one position and it can no longer move, meaning it can't distribute the forces that are coming up from the ground. But energy can't be created or destroyed, right? It needs to go somewhere. So when we lock an ankle, we lock a foot, we put it in a restrictive shoe. And I don't know about you, John, but I used to see guys, especially linemen, get taped over top of the ankle or over top of the shoe. So they had two tape jobs on.
Yeah, it's called a spat. So guys would get their shoes spatted, and I would never spat a shoe, even if when I blew my ankle out, because I was too afraid that somebody would look and be like, one ankle's taped. So they would only they would spat both shoes because they didn't want, and a lot of the brothers did it because they just thought it looked sweet. But like for me, I would never spat a shoe. I mean, but that was mainly because I just didn't want somebody to look and be like, oh, his left ankle's fucked up. Because then they would just, for the same reason I saw if a dude was wearing an elbow brace or had something that looked different, I'd be like, oh, must be an injury. I know where I'm going.
Yeah, so I think essentially what happens is you get now this correlation where you've taken the movement out of the foot and the ankle, so that force has got to go somewhere. And then this brings up Christian McCaffrey's injury, the high ankle sprain. It goes directly into what we call the syndesmosis joint, which is right between the tibia and the fibula, so the two lower leg bones. And that's where that little fibrous connective tissue in there can't really wistand that amount of force, especially with like 250-pound plus guys, with all the ground reaction force of gravity going through it. But then the other problem, and this is where I think that the ACL tears come in, is because when the foot is supposed to pronate, it allows the tibia to turn inward or internally rotate, which creates a little bit of a twisting effect. We call it the screw home mechanism at the knee. And we're supposed to get about 30 degrees each way when the knee bends and extends. And if we don't have that, the forces are going to go directly into the menisci, into the PCL, the ACL, maybe even the collateral ligaments as well. And then we see a disastrous outcome for that, obviously.
Wow. No, this is, as you're talking, I mean, like what's crazy on that high ankle sprain. So when I broke my fibula, my foot was planted and I got hit and I got loaded. And as my fibula was breaking, for some reason, I had this like instinct to jump. And I jumped out and somehow got my foot unstuck, because the worst thing that you can happen is when you break your fibula and your foot's plaqued, normally you dislocate your ankle. And then they have to go in and pin the ankle and they do all that. And then you're out for fucking 2 years. Right. But it was kind of weird on film. As soon as I got hit, I just jumped backwards and they were like, "How'd you know to jump?" And I'm like, "I don't know, fucking survival."
Intuition.
Intuition, just like having been in like bad places enough to be like, "No, my spider sense is tingling." But I remember watching guys, get loaded and twist and get that high ankle sprain. And those dudes were hurt for like 12, 14 weeks. Yeah. Like they would go out and they couldn't push off. I mean, that was one of those injuries that, was almost worse than an ACL, because at least they can go in and fix the ACL and get you on the road. Mm-hmm. That high ankle sprain just heals itself whenever it heals. And there's not really a mechanism to like speed up the recovery. And
no, and then what we're seeing is a lot of these guys come back too soon from it too. Like I remember, I think it was Adrian Peterson, like Odell Beckham Jr., they both had high ankle sprains and tried to come back too early, and then it cost them the rest of the year, right? Because it's just, they never fixed the underlying problem of actually looking at the foot. We just put them back into the exact same environment, right? So the same forces are getting put through the joint. They just couldn't take it anymore. We had more of a catastrophic blowout then. We
at the Eagles, we had a rookie, first round draft pick, and I can't remember his name. Week 1, he got a high ankle sprain, and he sat out for like 14 weeks. And the problem is a first round draft pick, defensive lineman in that situation, especially being a rookie and having a high ankle sprain, which people kind of like poo-hoo a little bit. The media absolutely killed this dude and the team, and like, the coaches and all that, all of a sudden, kind of saying he was a malingerer and lazy and didn't want to do it. And all of a sudden, that dude ended up fucking playing himself right out of the league just from that injury. Mm-hmm. And when he came back, he was all right, but he always had that label. And that's such a dangerous thing, because, man, that's one of those injuries that doesn't on paper look like, oh, like, what do you mean? It's just a high ankle sprain. It's a sprain, and they've kind of attached it. What they should talk is like a high ankle ligament rupture.
Was it Bunkley?
Right. No, this would have been, he was defensive lineman. This would have been like in 2003 or 2004.
So Tex, while you're looking at that, Z, can you explain, and I know in previous podcasts we kind of talk about like this compensatory spiraling action that is triggered in the foot, and then as you go upstream, there's kind of this, Fibonacci sequence. Where are the points, like, can you walk us through that chain, that kinetic chain up into, I guess, I don't know, the hip, the back, the shoulder, or what, and maybe in a specific movement, right? So like, I think oftentimes it's deceleration where a non-contact injury occurs. Like, what could be happening that's causing a non-contact ACL injury, and then what should be happening, Right.
And we kind of covered this a little bit during the arthritic toe podcast that we did, but there are only two shapes of the lower body. You either have a pronating foot, which is the foot flattening to the ground, which comes along with knee flexion and hip flexion, or you have the opposite shape, which is the supination, the arch lifting, knee extending, hip extending. That's it, right? Those are the only two shapes that we have. So with each one, there are different motions occurring at the joints. So when the foot's flattening, we got the lower bone, the tibia internally rotating, femur's internally rotating, and the hip is coming forward. Okay. With the supination, where the lifting of the arch is supinating, coming off the ground. The tibia is actually externally rotating, femur's externally rotating, and the pelvis is externally rotating. So these two shapes, we see them in sport, but if we don't have the correct contact point with the ground where it all starts in the foot, it's going to send mixed signals up the rest of the chain. So for example, when we're decelerating, like you brought up, we're usually getting into a bent knee position, and we're trying to allow the forces to go into something like the hips and the hamstrings to slow us down. Well, if the foot doesn't flatten to the ground, right, we never get the tibial internal rotation to occur, which means now we're stuck in an externally rotated position. And it's like trying to press the accelerator with the parking brake on, right? So you got forces going one way, the brain's trying to move you another way, and then you're constantly trying to move yourself in the opposite direction. So there's like so much going on. And then all those forces get pushed into structures, like we talked about before, either on the outside of the knee, inside the knee, or even up at the hip. And we see this a lot with low back injuries because we don't see the pelvis and the hip aren't working very well together, not getting the spiraling pathway to rotation to occur. And a lot of those forces go directly into the sacroiliac joint or into the spinal column. Detailed, I know.
No, I mean, and that's what I was looking for. And I guess,
yeah.
So there's like this chain is like 4 rotating segments almost, right? Mm-hmm. Is that what it kind of shakes out to be?
It's like wringing out of a towel almost. So it's either winding up, which is what we would call like the hip extension component, which is your force production, or unwinding, which would be more of the force attenuation or the pronation.
Or like the reduction.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like absorbing.
Exactly.
So would it make sense that if I guess we would have to go back and watch all the different injuries, but I'm interested to know if the ACL tears are happening in like force, I don't know, like reduction or force, like what's the other side would be?
Production?
Yeah, production.
Yeah,
production.
Like, are you exploding or are you absorbing the force? Are you accelerating or are you decelerating? Because what it looked like is a lot of guys are getting hurt like at the end of the play. Like I saw the Nick Busu one, like it didn't look outside the norm.
Yeah, I need a correction. So the Jets and 49ers at the MetLife Stadium, that's when those 10 injuries occurred. And there was another Jets guy, but the Barkley was against the Bears week 2, and that was in Chicago's field. So I need a correction there.
Which is a new stadium as well.
So the Barkley, just rewatched the video. Essentially, he meets a defender. Defender's trying to drive him back. He's still trying to go forwards. They're basically meeting in a deadlock, and he's just trying to brace himself, running towards the right. His right knee gives out. So these guys.
Part of the issue though, man, is and I and this is maybe the folklore part of the NFL part. Everything I've seen on Saquon Barkley, I mean, just shows him like training, and the dude's an absolute beast. And they show these things like, look how strong he is, and they've kind of built him up into this little bit of a Superman deal. So all of a sudden he goes out there, and as a running back, every time I saw a dude go for those extra yards or not want to get tackled or try to do that shit, they end up getting hurt. Just like Priest Holmes and those guys would be like, if they got hit or they got tackled, like they didn't fight. They just went down, and they were like, don't worry, we're going to get another play.
Well, there was the Sean Alexander. He was a Seattle Seahawks running back.
Yeah.
And I remember him getting a lot of guff because he would just fall down, or run out of bounds.
Yeah.
And then because I'm used to it was Eddie George, Oilers into Titans.
Remember
bruiser.
Eddie George and those high knees?
Oh, yeah. I loved it. And then he would find a safety if he was running an open field towards the right and wide open, and there was a safety to the left.
Take it to him.
He would just go tackle the defender.
There would be a big difference. Do you know how big Eddie George was?
Well, yeah.
I mean, he was like what was he, like 6'2", 6'3"? Like he
looked like a turtle. He was awesome.
Dude, he was the guy who was like probably I don't know, and this name's not going to mean anything to you guys, but there was a running back named Chuck Muncie who played at Cal, who played in the NFL and ended up basically partied himself out of the league, but easily could have been the best to ever play the game. I mean, like Gale Sayers and Walter Payton. I mean, Chuck Muncie was like pretty legit. And I met Chuck Muncie, and he was probably every bit of 6'3.5", probably 260. And that was how big he was when he played. And this is back in the 70s and 80s. Look him up, Chuck Muncie. I think he's since passed away. But a big running back like that. But I think the problem is that people are so big and strong as a running back. If you're going to take that load and try to be a tough guy in this, you're just not going to last. You got to go. You got to get out of bounds. You got to go down.
Well, think about the situation that's occurring here. We got these big ass dudes, and now we're building really, really strong, powerful engines inside them, right? So from the human body perspective, engines are in the hips, right? We know this.
Yeah.
And we have such powerful, like a Ferrari engine in the hips, yet our feet are like Pintos. So they're the weak point in the chain. So yes, we have the ground reaction forces coming through the foot up to the hip, but we can generate a lot of force to the hip. And if the feet cannot control that force, that's where it's going to break, and it's going to go someplace else. Like, think about it this way. Like, I grew up, I played a real sport. Unlike you, John, I played baseball. So I was a catcher for a long time. Yeah. But I wore cleats my whole life from like the age of 4. And so I never knew what it was like to actually grip the ground or create a tripod foot. And I still vividly remember, like, when I first started learning the back squat, I would blow out all of my shoes on the outside edge. So essentially using the shoe as like a bolster or something to push out against, because I couldn't create the internal torque or the pressure on my own feet. So I'd blow out the outside edge. And looking back now, I had a lot of hamstring injuries as well, because I was constantly putting all the force on the outside of my feet instead of using my big toe as that lever to push off of. So all that force is going up into the hamstrings.
So
on the outside.
Do you think that maybe this is like these are just up-chain effects that we're seeing? Like, guys are probably, the shoes probably are less than ideal. Their ankles are taped. They're probably coming in with some maybe, a toe injury. I mean, I'd love to see, like, hey, these guys tore ACLs, but these guys had a toe injury or a turf toe, something going on in their foot. They lock it down, they spat, they do these things, and then it reduces proprioception. All of a sudden, the foot can't react in the right way. It goes up-chain and they blow an ACL.
Yeah, I think it's a reductionist level of thinking. And obviously, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Einstein.
We're not getting any different results. We're seeing the same shit occurring year after year. So I think we need to take a step back and learn to understand deeper about what's going on in the foot and the ankle, so that we can actually make some beneficial changes. And using the same strategies over and over and over again about trying to isolate and control. Like, we cannot control chaos. There's so much going on. And I think we're naive to think that we have the power to prevent all these injuries through these mechanical strategies or these mechanical vectors of trying to isolate and control and support things.
And what can be a training solution? We can't integrate chaos into the training that's representative of game day. So what do we do?
That's a great question too, because I've been told by a lot of athletic trainers that it's too hard to train the feet in the gym, in the weight room. And I call bullshit on that, because it's either we're lazy, right? We don't want to, or we don't know how. There's an ignorance factor as well. And we know there are plenty of strength guys out there doing it. Look at all of Cal Dietz's work with training the barefoot through his different levers and his 5 different positions. There are ways to do it. But I think that's where we start to chip away at a prevention, because we're never going to be able to prevent, but we can at least reduce the risk of. And I think there is a lot to be said for taking a look and using the lens as a foot for training, and making that the strongest link in the chain, so that we can have, people say trickle down effect, but in a sense, this is like a trickle up effect to producing stronger knees, hips, and actually reducing a lot of these injuries that we're seeing occurring year after year.
But if you don't change the ankle taping routine and the direction that footwear is going within cleats and spikes and things like that, would having a stronger foot really help? If you're handicapping it through these taping and footwear practices, right?
Yeah, you are. And I think, like, from controllable factors, like we talked about this in the beginning with the turf not really being a modifiable factor, like, it's there. It's going to be hard, because a lot of this stuff, this dogma is indoctrinated in high level sports. Like, it's what we've been doing for decades, but just because we've been doing it for decades doesn't make it right. So it's going to take some time, right? But I think you can work on the other side of the coin of strengthening up the foot. So now you have the capacity on the other end of the spectrum to withstand more and to put yourself into a better position, even though you're inside the environment of cleat. Because listen, the cleats aren't going away. The athletic shoes aren't going away. I think we can make some modifications to them to improve their functionality with the foot. But for the time being, like, it's going to take a few years for that to take place, and for to see those changes happen.
So what was the research that has got footwear to where it's at now, and these cleats where it's at now, with like the rigid sole and
a lot of that came
like
from
the narrow toe box and everything like that?
Well, a lot of that came from biomechanical data. So we know we can make you faster and more powerful by narrowing the foot, right? It's creating that supinatory rigid lever. That transverse arch that goes from the big toe to the fifth toe, it's like a class 2 lever, like a wheelbarrow. It's designed to handle a lot of loads. We figured out that if you can narrow the base of support and put it into a more directed position, you can now generate more power, more force, more speed in a shorter amount of time. Okay? But what we've seen now over the years is that it's having a negative long-term effect even on the foot, because it's changing the shape, right? That's how we get the bunions. And then we start to shift the pressure now away from the big toe, because we're forcing it to bend to the outside edge of the foot. So all those forces now, the brain's not stupid, right? It's going to figure out another lever to push off of. And it's usually going to try and shift it over to the second and third toe, or even over to the fifth toe. And as we start to see these negative ramifications occur. But we do know that from an injury reduction standpoint, that foot does need to flatten so you can attenuate the load, and we do need both. So I think it's going back to the whole reductionist mindset, as we took data from biomechanical research and applied it in a very narrow scope. And now we're seeing a lot of these negative ramifications come despite the improvement in performance.
It's a shame.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing a resurgence in like the more barefoot style footwear. I think it's only a matter of time until it does transfer over to sport.
Well, the one way it's going to transfer over to sport is if Nike decides that they want to do it.
And that's what I keep thinking is
that's
the
a whole
amount of
different
money.
conversation.
No, well, the problem too is, and just this is purely aesthetics. The shoes look sweet. I remember opening the box and seeing these shoes, and they like are tapered and they got like all this. And then it was funny, like when you look at the barefoot shoes, like you look at Tom's and you look at something, like they're very unattractive because they're flat and they kind of wide toe box in this, and while they're comfortable, but like I think that there's an age old like look fast, be fast. Like, oh man, these shoes look fast. I'm going to be, and I still do it with my kids. They put on shoes and they run around the store. I'm like, do they make you faster? Oh yeah. Okay. We're getting those ones. Like I told Kashi that his Shark Vans, he ran faster in his Shark Vans than he did in the non-Shark Vans. So he got the Shark Vans. So like that piece works, but I think that there's a real thing with they haven't found a way to make a practical shoe that looks cool that people are going to want to wear. Because at the end of the day, man, and I know this sounds, people aren't going to believe me, NFL players, not all of them, but many of them are hyper concerned with how they look on the field for the fans and on TV.
I totally believe that.
Dude, tapes and socks and these whole
what face mask you want to wear, what type of visor, right?
Like,
how you can roll your gloves,
how they taper the pants. So dudes will get their pants tapered up so they're like knees, and they won't wear knee pads. They wear like 4 sets of socks. They pull the socks up because they don't want color. Every NFL team has it's supposed to be color and white, so they pull them up so they look like they're wearing white socks. I mean, there's all of this stuff that guys do for just to try to look cool, and I think the shoes are a major player in that. And I remember, man, dudes like lobbying and fighting to wear black shoes. Oh, if we wear black this, we should, and there's no team that wears black shoes in the NFL. They're always white shoes. But then you see like the breast cancer awareness, they let them wear different colors and this. But I think the problem is that the way that they would make the shoe that would be potentially the best shoe for the foot in terms of minimizing this stuff, it would be extremely uncool, and dudes would be like, I want the cool looking shoe.
It's like a car though too, right? If you were to make the perfectly aerodynamic car, it would look like an airfoil or a teardrop, right? Like all round edges and super douchey, and if you start looking at like really elegantly designed cars with like the right curves and hard lines and how light hits it, you know what I mean? I feel like it's the same thing with
it's
the
like
shoe,
the Ferraris.
Right?
I was on that podcast with the dude from Portugal the other day, and we were talking about like the inherent coach's eye, and I made the relation or the deal like from a mile away I can hear a front engine V12 Ferrari and know exactly that sound because that's the sound they tune their motor for. And when it pulls up, and I'm not a Ferrari fan, but I mean, you pull up and you're just like, holy shit, look at the fenders and the way that thing flows. And it's just, you don't know why, but it's so aesthetically pleasing. So, I mean, there's something to it. Now, does a Ferrari get you anywhere better from point A to point B? Probably. But at the end of the day, like, what's the point? Like, but I think for these guys, you're getting paid $135 million. Maybe they look at it and like, fuck it, I got hurt. It's part of the deal. I'll rehab and I'll be back next year. But I would want, and so I used to wear Nike molds, and they would actually make them in a wider size than I needed because I wanted the wider toe box. and I would get like maybe 2 or 3 pairs of cleats a year. I'd wear one for practice, one for games, and I would make sure that they were nice and broken in and soft and like not rigid. The soles weren't real hard, and like to do all these things so that I felt like they were flexible and I could move and my foot could slide.
So that was going to be my question for you, John. What is the shoe experience? And you answered it with your question: 1 practice cleat, 1 game cleat. Because
some dudes
fresh
wear fresh shoes, brand new shoes, every day. So I know dudes that wore brand new shoes at practice and brand new shoes for every game.
And that's what I could never comprehend, because it was always the pain of, I would buy 1 pair of cleats for the spring season, and you just break them in the first 3 weeks, and it sucks. Mm-hmm. And then you have a great pair to run through the year of spring into fall, and then redo it. So it was like 1 pair, good pair that you could trust.
Yeah.
I could never imagine freshies every day.
And dudes wore it. I mean, but I was also cool. Like, the only fresh thing I wore is I wore a new pair of gloves every Sunday because
same jock, unwashed.
Yeah, of course.
As is tradition.
Over the face. But I would tape.
That's your mask?
I would tape gloves on my hand.
Before
I would just cut them off after. But like there was a whole deal, man. Like I wore the exact same uniform in 100-degree weather as I wore in negative 14 degrees. Same t-shirt, same set of shorts underneath, same socks, everything. And I just didn't deviate. I did the exact same thing. And it was just because you get strangely superstitious with this stuff. And we'd get 2 or 3 players of, if you wanted new cleats every day, you could wear them. But I would rotate cleats in training camp, and I would make sure I had broken in cleats to wear all season. And then you have practice ones, and I would still wear those.
I got one final question for Matt, because I know we're running down on time here. In your experience working with professional athletes, what's the weirdest superstition quirk that you've just accepted
He's a
that they do?
baseball player.
Oh,
well, they're still professional.
We're full of superstitions in baseball. Oh, geez. So what's the weirdest superstition that I've seen?
You saw and you just kind of, okay, cool, man. Whatever it takes for you to do well.
So I don't actually have one from baseball, but I have one from when I was with University of Pittsburgh's basketball team. These guys would wear the same socks every single game, every single day for practice. They never changed them. And of course, what were we doing back then? Lots of ankle taping. So they'd take these socks off and it would just be gross, man. They had probably some of the worst feet I've ever experienced. Those guys. Yeah. It was sexy.
Yeah.
Ugh, John, you got a weird one from somebody else? The napper?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to name a name, but I knew a couple different guys that would frequent prostitutes before the games as a
same ladies.
No, we're not in the NBA.
Huh.
But I mean,
you got to release that nervous energy somehow.
Dude. I mean, guys had really, really weird stuff. I can't remember who. One of the guys I played with had to have 2 packs of Wrigley spearmint gum on Sunday, and he would put them in his pants, and then he would chew the gum. But he had to have 2 packs. I mean, there was the amount of weird stuff that people had. But I just remember I can't remember the dude who was at the Super Bowl, got busted. Basically, they caught him propositioning a prostitute back to his room, and it was like he had just got done in his Bible study and the whole deal, and it was just part of his tradition. Yeah, his routine was that he had a hooker back to his room before the game, and and the dude gets busted at the Super Bowl the night before the Super Bowl trying to proposition a hooker back to his room for his, and he was like, "Well, it's my superstition. This is what I do before games." And they're like, "You were just at a Bible study with your family."
Doesn't matter.
Nah, dudes are
weird. It's like Joe Boo sacrificing a chicken.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like when he
Major
showed
League.
up when he showed up with the bucket of KFC.
Yeah.
That was 2, wasn't it?
No, he's like, dude, we can't have people throwing up in the locker room, and he comes in and he hands him the bucket of chicken. He's like, it's the best I can do. That's always the best one too. When he goes, he's like, hey bartender, Jabu needs a refill. He hits him with the bat in the back of the head. Oh shit, that's the best. And then he's pitching with Jabu next to his foot.
I love it, man. That's great rewatch.
Are you telling me Jabu can't hit a curveball? No. What does he say? It's like,
you saying
Jesus Christ?
Are you saying Jesus can't hit a curveball? That's one of my favorite one-liners in all sports movies.
Dude, there's so many one-liners.
One of my all-time favorite movies.
Randy Quaid in Major League 2 when he's like, fucking tear the stadium down.
Oh, The Fan.
Yeah, The Fan. Oh, it's some of Randy Quaid's best work. That in Independence Day.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
In the words of my generation, up yours.
There we have it.
I know what I'm watching this weekend.
Yeah.
Major League. God damn it. That's
We'll throw
a
it
great
up there.
movie.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening to our, our analysis of what's going on with the trend here and one of the biggest competitive stages in the world. It's unfortunate to see some of these kids have to go through it. Kids, you like that, John? Just a couple young guys out there playing, not like old timers like us, just old and washed up.
Old school. I know you were going to say Zach Evanish, old school. And you know what's crazy? Is when he listens to this podcast, he's going to text me, old school.
Johnny,
old school.
Baby.
Oh, dude, I love getting random text messages from Zach. So he'll listen to this, he'll text me, and then it'll be old school. Johnny, old school.
Matt, final one. What can people look for when they're watching football to show a good position for guys that are changing direction well and not getting hurt?
Oh, so there really is no one great position. We know like having the knee over the toe is a very biomechanically safe position, but we still need to be able to take the knee on the inside edge of the instep and also on the outside edge, because you're going to experience it in sport. Like sport's messy, it's chaotic. We've talked about that already. So it comes down to preparation, but what you're going to see is these guys that are changing direction and cutting really well is they'll have the knee over that instep on the inside edge, no matter what position the foot is in. So it could be turned out, could be straight ahead, it could be in, but they're still going to have the knee lined up going over either the first ray or over the inside edge. And what that tells me is that foot is actually flattening and pronating into the earth, which means they're going to get a lot of elastic energy return and be able to control it upstream to be able to produce a lot of force. So
interesting.
Look at Barry Sanders' work.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was going to say is like slow motion replay on any sort of juke or cutback, and you'll see it. Or because we mentioned Gale Sayers earlier, RIP, passed away yesterday.
It was yesterday, the day before. But I mean, he had a short career in like the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But like
ruthless.
The comment that I remember and I still am a huge fan of like the old NFL films. Like, it was a cold day in Lambeau Field, especially with Sable's dad. But I just remember the comment that was attributed to Gale Sayers every time was he left opponents clutching at air. Right, he was like, Gale Sayers moves and leaves opponents clutching at air. And like I always remember that quote was like clutching at air. And then I was reading like one of somebody put out and was writing it, and they actually referenced to that point from NFL films that left opponents clutching at air. And when they said it, I was like, fuck, that was it.
I didn't know this. Fun fact: Gale Sayers, the movie Brian's Song. This is based off real life story between him and another player. I didn't realize that was him.
He only played, 6 or 7 years? I forgot how short his career was. Pretty short.
It just blew my mind because we've talked about it on previous sports movies podcasts. I didn't know it was him. I'm checking, John, for you. Any closeout? We do have an article from Matt Zanis.
Check out the Power Athlete blog at powerathletehq.com/blog. for all sorts of goodies, including Z's article on this, which will get a little nittier and grittier. But Matt, thanks, man. And ladies and gentlemen, if you're not following Matt and you need to get on Rooted in Movement on Instagram and check it out. He's dropping knowledge left and right. And let's see, anything else there? Z, you want him checking anything else out?
No, that's a great place to start. A lot of great posts on there. Learn a lot about me and personality. And you can reach out to me on there too. Love hearing from everybody.
Sweet. And if you have a question for us that you want us to answer, call us, because we can't read your minds every show like we did today. Call us because the hotline is open.
It's hot.
Hot. 929-464-4640. That's 929-0. And Tex, do you have the answer to the question?
No, this is so difficult. He's from Omaha.
No, just type in like Gale Sayers' career. How long did Gale Sayers play in the NFL?
I'm not editing this silence out text. This is what you're doing to the listeners.
1965
7 seasons.
till 1971.
Yeah, so he played.
So you had 4 minutes to look it up. What were you searching besides how long did Gale Sayers play in the NFL?
I got all these fun facts about him.
Here's the crazy part.
Born in Omaha.
So when I go to Google, I ask Google exactly what I want. Like, I don't be like,
No.
Gale Sayers' career. I'm like, Google, tell me how long Gale Sayers played.
Now, this might shock you, John. So does everyone else.
Except Tex.
Well, he was drafted in both the NFL and the AFL in the top 5 picks. He went to college at Kansas, Rock Chalk or whatever they say, and then 4-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah, 7 years. But yeah, he had a really short
First team
career.
All-Pro 5 years from 1965 until 1969.
Don't put that obligatory Chicago accent on your Gale Sayers stats.
The sad part is he died of complications due to dementia and Alzheimer's. Yeah.
Rest in peace, big guy.
Which is, yeah, man. He unbelievable player, man. Also, what was it, Chuck Muncie? I mean, how long did he play?
Oh, he died at 60. I don't have his stats, but
dude, unbelievable.
I got all this other random information.
We don't have the time, to be honest with you, Tex, for you to circuitously search that. Okay, Z, thanks, man. Thank you, Power Athlete Nation.
Yep. Great conversation.
Call
Thank
us.
you.
Bye-bye.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. Head to powerathletehq.com/training to choose from a number of programs to meet your specific performance goals. And if you like to break a mental sweat too, visit academy.powerathletehq.com and become a real stakeholder in you or your athlete's success. Until next time, bye!